All right, I've got all my layer assets, all my vectors worked out, organized, clean, and I have just blank backgrounds, black, gray, and white behind them. But I want my background to be more interesting. Notice this just has kind of this geometric pattern background. That's okay. It's not super exciting. A lot of them have sunburst backgrounds. So I found some high resolution, I think they're 4 megapixels or more, because the background doesn't need to be as sharp as the spot illustration, obviously. But these are some compositing images that I can transform and use as possible backgrounds. Subtle textures here. Again, just looking up texture overlays. Some files do that out of Google Images. They'll just automatically download, which is a little scary in terms of viruses and things. But this is a work computer, no worries. And then these colors are not what I want, but I'm looking for like the textures and the feel. But then I might also search for some other things, like I actually have a Pokemon card with me, and the back of the Pokemon card is actually a pretty nice spot illustration example. Right? It has this kind of high res. It has this kind of swirl behind it. You can see. So I wonder if I can find something kind of like that. So what if I look for a whirlpool texture overlay? I'm not trying to copy it. I'm trying to have something similar. And because it's soft, I'm going to allow it to be any size. But it's kind of the hourglass whirlpoolness of it that was so cool. Not just the straight whirlpool, but all of these are interesting. Could be useful. See if I can do an hourglass whirlpool. Should have expected to get a lot of tubs. It might help to actually limit the size to get rid of a lot of that. Oh yeah, some space graphics. Now this could be really helpful, especially because Hubble Space Telescope images are all public domain. Doesn't mean I have to treat them like space, but I might be able to get the feel. So much that we can play with. There we go. Okay, so you see the Pokemon card here. And then to really make it look like a card, I might actually have to do this halftone dot reduction too. So you can see it here in this high-res scan of the Pokecard. You can see how the image is actually printed, and we can mimic that in Photoshop. And it's something I always like to show. So I like this one. It's nice and big. I'll put that to the desktop. It's not as big. It's nice and big. Yeah, so the Hubble is just takes these amazing images that then artists use in all kinds of different ways. And we're allowed to because they're public domain images. But in order to make it your image and not the public domain image that Hubble gave you, you have to transform them into your own work, of course. All right, so now I think I've got enough. I've got enough stuff to kind of build and work with the background. So what do I do first? Well, let's bring in a nice sunburst, kind of like this. So I just drag and drop it from the desktop, orient it, just like we've learned from all of our compositing. I'm going to place it in. And then move it behind everything. Let's get it so there's no border on it, grow it a little bit further. This to me is like framing the image, just making it look good. Now obviously, that sunburst really helps lead the eye to the character. But what if the color just isn't right? Well, I can duplicate it, and I can then rasterize it, then go to image adjustment and do just a hue saturation change. And find the colors that I think make more sense. I can go green, I can go blue, kind of like that blue. Yeah, let's go way to the edge. Then I can desaturate it a little bit, maybe even lighten it a little bit. Just a touch. Make sure there's no other color that really pops out. If I want to complement it, I might do kind of orange. But this blue works. Now I can do the subtle color by going to color balance and playing with how much color is in the midtones. How green does it go? I think I want it to go a little bit deeper. And a little bit darker and worn. I just basically want my character to pop, to have everything be supported. By putting a little bit of red in there, it helps with my other color choices. Get it a little away from green. So it went from this to this to this. Right? Save it as I go. Now let's bring in another texture. So that's my base layer. I liked this vignette. I already have vignetting. Vignetting is when it's darker on the edges. Darker or lighter, the edges are treated differently than the center of the design. And this has a pretty strong kind of dark shadow gradated vignette, which is helpful in a central design poster like mine. It also has this subtle pattern to it, whirlpool pattern. But I can try overlaying it. I can try screening it so it just helps to lighten. And that's pretty effective. See? I can play with its opacity, of course, so it's more subtle. I can let it only brighten towards the middle with color dodge. Or I can have only the lighter color show through, which will let it kind of drop in and out. So I think I liked, let's see. Yeah, I think I like the color dodge at a lower opacity. Because I can always brighten this using levels. Or darken it. So save as I go. Okay. Next, let's bring in some of the grunge texture. Go to my top layer, bring this in. Now, in order to use it as just a texture overlay and not a color overlay at all, I'm going to take all its color out. Otherwise, I'm going to be fighting that green a lot. This is to help it look more like a worn card. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, Desaturate. Or, let's see, Saturation. Won't let me desaturate because it's just one layer. Take the saturation all the way down. And then I can go to Overlay. Play with the opacity. Just so that texture is there a little bit. Breaks it up. And it's a little too crisp, that texture. So taking its opacity down really helps. All right, you can see how that kind of looks when up close. And then I have to ask, do I want all those spirals then? And yeah, I think I do. Optimistic and nice. Okay. Now that kind of swirl, like what's on the Pokemon card. Let's see, what's my best bet there? Let's just try taking something like this. Really positioning it in a different way. Honestly, probably just taking it like this and then warping it. So rasterize it, warp it. Come on. My file is over a gigabyte now. You can see here while I'm working on it. So we're asking a lot of the computer in poster design, but that's the way it should be. Trying to get the most out of it. So that's pretty dramatic. And I'm not sure if I want that color to interact or not. Let's try it without. So let's make a duplicate of it and do the same thing we did before. Desaturate it. And then try different overlays. So that's pretty cool. As a screen over the whole thing. Gives you that kind of cloudy explosion. Let me look quick at the Pokemon card. Where did I have that? Yeah, that kind of cloudy explosion around, that swirl. Doesn't have that swirl to it quite yet, though it does all kind of center. And I could do things like swirl filters and stuff. I don't want to get too cheesy. Let me play with the opacity a little bit. I like it pretty strong. It actually helps with my little highlights. Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's see if I do that same thing with the color. If that's more or less interesting. So I have that little red in there. I can try them together. What do you guys think? With the color or without the color? If I did it with the color, I'd probably leave it about like that. So yeah, it's a tough call. That's why sometimes I'm happy to have clients that tell me what they want. Let's try a different blending mode. Yeah, it needs to be one of these.